In recent years, we have seen vegan burgers that bleed, and we've watched companies grow in their production of vegan burgers and meats that satisfy a craving for what many of us knew before. Some vegans don't actually eat these foods because they remind them too much of the animal flesh, and they just can't get past that. Others feel even more secure in their commitment to veganism when they find foods like this, knowing that they'll stick with it no matter what. They are satisfied and they are happy to contribute to this innovation and these changes that we're seeing. It reminds me of the first time after just going vegetarian in 2001 that I had a vegan hot dog. And it was only like a couple of weeks after I'd gone vegetarian, and this vegan hot dog back in 2001, to me anyway, tasted so much like what I remembered, a hot dog that I'd probably had only a few weeks before, that I couldn't eat it. It turned my stomach and I just was not into it. And for years after that, anytime at a barbecue, I definitely was filling a hot dog bun with sauerkraut and pickles and ketchup and mustard and just eating that instead of a vegan hot dog. We've come a long way, and I have changed too. I know there are some vegans who maybe wouldn't even admit that they craved an animal product from their past and that they would love a vegan version of it so they could still have that. There's so much tied up in food. To me, it makes sense. For a long time after going vegetarian, the food that I craved the most was a tuna fish sandwich with like mayo and onions. Very simple, but it was something that I thought, I wish there was a version of this that I could eat that would hit that craving. And it took me decades. Like I only just in like maybe the last 5-6 years really uncovered chickpea salad. And that like does it for me. I don't actually need any of the tuna replacements, but some people do. And some people really enjoy them. Is that so wrong? For me, if it's made from plants, I'm into it. But you'll hear in this episode that Bruce is not just talking about food made from plants. He's going to talk about cultivated meat as well. He mentions it he covers it quite a lot, in fact, in his book, Meat, which he's here to also talk about. But he does touch on all of the plant-based meats and the innovation that has come from that as well. It's interesting. It's different. Where will it go from here? Who can say? I don't know. Bruce has a lot more insight to that than I do. If you're listening to this podcast, you may already have some thoughts on both plant-based meats and cultivated meats. I know I certainly did. So I'm curious what your thoughts will be after you take a listen. Are you more firmly in the opinion that you started with? Has something shifted? Are there questions you wish I would have asked Bruce? I'd love for you to tell me. You can send me an email. You can comment on the post on Instagram about this or on any social media about this episode, or even leave it as a comment on Spotify. What more information, what additional information do we need in order to truly understand this? Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 141 of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. I'm Kimberly, your host, and I'm super excited to be here with you today. Did You Bring the Hummus is a podcast for all things vegan. Before we get started, I have one very important question for you. Did you bring the hummus? Today, I am joined by Bruce Friedrich, the founder and president of GFI, or the Good Food Institute, a global science think tank with more than 240 full-time team members across 6 organizations around the world. Bruce is also the author of Meat: How the Next Agricultural Revolution Will Transform Humanity's Favorite Food and Our Future, which was released in February of 2026. Hey, Bruce, welcome.
Thanks, Kimberly. I'm delighted to be here.
I am delighted that you are here. So my very first question for you, as for all of my guests, tell me about your vegan journey.
My vegan journey. So I grew up in Oklahoma, got to college in 1987, joined a group called Poverty Action Now, and somebody gave me the book Diet for a Small Planet by Frances Moore Lapay, and I devoured it, was completely shocked both by what it explains about the inefficiency of cycling crops through animals, and also my obliviousness to what felt so completely obvious after I read the book, that it was a colossal use of resources to feed crops to animals so that we can eat animals. And I went vegetarian except low-fat cottage cheese in August of 1987. And I may have not had, I certainly never and I guess I would eat oatmeal or something. So I guess I had had vegetarian meals. But really, growing up in Oklahoma, the idea of having a lunch or dinner that was not meat-based, or really even a snack that was not meat-based, is extraordinarily rare. And I've been vegetarian. And so I really just thought I would waste away to nothing. Like, I had no idea. So I was eating massive amounts of low-fat cottage cheese. And I really hated it. A revolting food, but very high in protein, which I thought was absolutely essential. And then I read some essays by Victoria Moran in Vegetarian News or Animals Agenda, or maybe both. And was so relieved that protein complementing was a myth, and that my many peanut butter sandwiches and oatmeal with overwhelming amounts of nuts would get me the complete proteins that I needed. So in November of 1987, I cut out the low-fat cottage cheese that I had been eating overwhelming amounts of since August, and went completely vegan with much joy at that point, to not eating the low-fat cottage cheese. So it really was it was a resource issue, and just, it takes somewhere like 4 to 8 calories into a chicken or a cow to get a calorie from milk or eggs, and even more calories to get a calorie from chicken or pork or beef or farm fish. And it just felt like, like I would never throw away 8 plates of food for the 1 plate that I was eating. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me to enter into that kind of a relationship by eating something that required all the extra land and water and other resources.
Yeah. Wow. Also, like, that book really messed people up with this protein combining, right? I mean, people still talk about it today, but where my heart really hurts around that is all the cottage cheese you were eating. My goodness, like you said, what a revolting food.
I don't think I had ever had any kind of cottage cheese up until that point. But they had it on the salad bar at my college, and I figured this is a complete protein, and I'm not going to be. It really was a sort of ascetical thing. And it was like, if I'm going to be eating something that requires all of these resources, I'm at least going to hate it. So that was quite literally my thinking. So yeah, was delighted to not have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Almost 39 years ago now.
That's amazing. I love hearing that. I've been vegan for 10 years. I've been vegetarian. I went vegetarian like 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago. So it wasn't as easy then as it is now, but it was even more difficult to find. And I think this kind of point will lead us nicely into the work you currently do. There were remember a lot of talk of things like lentil loaves and, lots of food kind of tasting like cardboard back then. And I remember my first experience with vegan cheese back in 2001 was real bad. Now it's so easy.
Did you hear about the vegan cheese factory that burned to the ground?
No.
Everything melted but the cheese.
That was my experience.
Yeah, growing up in Oklahoma, I'm not sure I have ever had cheese other than the stuff that comes in the slices, or on pizza. Like, I don't like the sort of, the fancy schmancy cheeses that people like, and now there are a bunch of vegan varieties of those. We were not adventurous in our eating when I was growing up. It was, very stereotypical. Minnesota was where my parents both grew up, so that's where all my relatives were. So I spent time in either Minnesota or Oklahoma, and like the idea of fancy cheese was just like not a thing that I was aware of. I don't think I knew anybody who ate cheese other than the stuff that came in the slices or on pizza. The advent of all these really nice new vegan cheeses it's like the first time I'm experiencing anything like that. It's kind of fun.
It is really fun, and they are so good. Yeah, growing up, I ate a lot of the. I didn't eat a ton of cheese, kind of in the same situation, but it was definitely the packaged. Take it out of the package, take it then out of the little folded piece of plastic that slice was in. And I remember the first time I went to visit one of my cousins, and I noticed in their fridge they had cheese from a deli, and I thought that was fancy cheese. So now having these other cheeses that are spreadable, like Tree Line and Rebel and Dare, I'm not sure how they say it, so like incredible and fancy.
Yeah, no, I don't think I knew what a deli was until I got to college either. But I don't think there were delis in Oklahoma or Minnesota. So
okay.
I would have also thought that was fancy cheese.
Yeah.
I had lots and lots of Wonder Bread with like sandwich meats and sandwich cheese. So I did eat a lot of that. I don't know. Some people I think probably don't. It's sort of cheese-ish food.
Yeah.
And I did eat a lot of that when I was growing up. But yeah, I don't know that I even knew there was like other cheese. I'm not sure.
Yeah. What an adventurous life we're living now, huh?
I know.
It's so cool.
It's exciting. Veganism has opened up a whole new world of cheese.
Who knew, right? And it's true that my the way that I eat since going vegan, so not even vegetarian, because I leaned on cheese very heavily because I didn't know how to cook. I didn't like vegetables when I first went vegetarian. So when I went vegan, though, that's really expanded how I eat, and it's made food way more interesting and exciting. And so you were doing something very interesting and exciting with food in your day-to-day work and life. And I'd love to get into that now.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah. So we'll start by saying that you have a book out called Meat, and the subtitle to it is How the Next Agricultural Revolution Will Transform Humanity's Favorite Food and Our Future. What makes, I've got a couple questions around this. So first, how is meat, do we know for sure it's our favorite food? Like, what made you say that meat is humanity's favorite food?
So it might have been hyperbolic, but I'm not sure. The main thing that caused me to say that is that for Diet for a Small Planet, I found completely convincing. It came out 55 years ago. Since Diet for a Small Planet came out, we're probably eating like 4 times as much meat as we did then in the US, and even a higher multiplier globally. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization started measuring meat consumption in 1961. And if you look at both meat and aquaculture, so farmed fish, there has been a new global record literally every single year since. So what is that, like 60 years or so?
Yeah.
There have been 3 blips in land animal meat, one for mad cow disease, one for African swine fever, followed by COVID. But if you look at the line on the, go to Our World in Data and pull up the line, there's a little bit of a blip, but then it picks up as though there hadn't been a blip. So the line is just like a straight upward trajectory. And it is probably as well established in social sciences as literally anything else, that the more people get wealthier, the more meat they are going to eat. And I don't know if it's biological or physiological or emotional or what, but people just eat more, and as a species, we just eat more and more and more meat. And maybe there's something else that we eat a lot of, and have an insatiable desire for. But I don't think so. I haven't heard anybody posit some other category of food that has sort of this sort of devotion from people. You'll hear people wax poetic about bacon. You'll hear people talk about their absolute love of Popeyes or Chick-fil-A. I was amazed teaching in inner city Baltimore, all of these progressive teachers, and just the devotion to Chick-fil-A among all of these progressives. And it was like, the chicken is amazing. We're going to look the other way about the politics. So I don't know. I mean, is there anything else that people are that get this worked up and excited about?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Not that I can think of.
Anyway, that was the genesis was basically, it was supposed to be provocative, but I also think it's true.
Yeah.
And the underlying point is, after all of this time and all of the overwhelming evidence about the health, environmental, global hunger, global health benefits of switching to a plant-based diet, and yet meat consumption just keeps going up, we need another strategy. And hey, we've got one. We can learn from renewable energy and electric vehicles and create the same product, but without all the external costs. So, that's the point of the book. And I think the title is a way to get people thinking about the necessity of that endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you're certainly right about the way that people use the word devotional. And it really does feel that way in all of the conversations that I've had over these decades with, friends or people I've just met. Anytime I have to declare, that I'm not consuming animals. It's so interesting how people do get defensive. And it's either like, you're not going to take my meat away from me, or that it's like, I don't want to know because they're afraid that they'll have to take the meat away from themselves. And so there really is this like visceral reaction that people will have. And there is this emotional connection. And of course, we know, like humans, we are, we connect with each other around food and cooking together, eating together. It is so much of a social thing. So of course, and cultural. And so it does make sense to me that there are so many ties to it where people do have a reaction. And what's interesting too is going outside of this, like, I feel like I have this connection and I want to keep eating this way because it reminds me of my grandma's chicken noodle soup or, whatever it is. You also talk about in one of the chapters about, and I'm just going to read this line. It turns out most people aren't looking for a tasteless veggie burger that's lower in fat. They're looking for something that mimics animal meat. And it is interesting how it isn't just the emotion or the connection to it, that there is an expectation of what it should feel like in your mouth and the experience of eating it. And when you give someone a veggie burger and they think a veggie burger is just a plant version of a beef burger, and then they bite into it and it's not that, because it is its own thing, people do like, oh, this is disgusting. Like, they can't even give it a chance, because in their head, they're already prepared for what they know, not something different. And so I appreciate that you call that out. So what's like, how do we do that? Do these current burgers out in like, we'll use burgers as an example, because I feel like a lot of people are familiar that there are Beyond and Impossible and those types of things. Is that acceptable? Does that meet the need?
Well, I will say, people say Beyond and Impossible and products like those. And it's really Impossible in a category all by itself. And then Beyond, and not much else that's widely available. So in chapter 7 of the book, I talk about, the endeavor has to be that we figure out how to make meat from plants that is indistinguishable and less expensive. And then the other thing that we work on and that the book is about is growing actual animal meat in factories rather than on live animals. So just like you can take a seed or a cutting from a plant and grow a whole plant, you can take a small amount of animal muscle or animal fat and grow literally unlimited additional animal muscle or animal fat in something that looks like a brewery. And you slash all of the external costs and eliminate the animal cruelty if you do that. And it's very, very early days in the endeavor. And I really wrote the book to say, this is scientifically possible. I interviewed about 25 plant-based meat scientists, about 25 cultivated meat scientists, did a deep dive with probably about a dozen of each, and talk about what I learned in the book through doing that. And because it is just so much more efficient, requires far less land, far less water, far fewer resources, all of the things that make meat so problematic from the standpoint of global poverty and the range of environmental issues, also mean it's a massive innovation opportunity and economic opportunity to make meat in a new and better way. But at the end of the day, it really does have to be something that tastes literally identical. Because, you said that people are looking for meat. They're not looking for something different. And I think there was something in the way that you framed it that was like, there's a bias in people. It really is that human beings are programmed to love meat. So, if people, John Stossel, 26 years ago, the right-wing news guy who did the Give Me a Break segment for a long time. So in the year 2000, the Dairy Council petitioned FDA to try to force soy milk and almond milk and the other plant-based milks to stop using the word milk. And Stossel went and served people at grocery stores, just like random people, soy milk and cow's milk. And most people preferred the soy milk. That has literally never happened with plant-based meat so far. And but 10 years ago, there was no Impossible Burger. There was no Beyond Burger, like 10 years ago right now. And I point out in the book that, 5 years ago, the only product that meat eaters liked was the Impossible Burger. If parity is 1.0, it wasn't quite at 1.0, but most meat eaters liked it as much. Now we've got, I think, 14 products that do quite well. I think 5 products that do particularly well. I think they might all be Impossible products, Impossible foods, but they're still way too expensive. And consumers, the vast majority of consumers are not going to pay more. But the prospect of plant-based meats or, vegetarian meats up until a decade ago, they were vegetarian first, and meat kind of not at all. And what we were asking people to do was pay more for something they liked less. Now we're very close to asking them to pay more for something that they like as much. which is at least better than asking them to pay more for something they like less. But the goal of GFI, the Good Food Institute, the organization that I founded, where I'm president, our goal is to make products that compete on price and taste, in very much the same way that renewable energy is trying to compete with fossil fuels, or electric vehicles are trying to compete with gas-powered cars. That's really the goal. And that's what the book is about.
Okay. Yeah. That was so the cost was something that I definitely wrote down. And I know in conversations I've had with other people, just kind of like casual conversations about all things in the vegan world. And so there's been a lot of talk about the cost, but what I got from your book, and I'd love for you to expand on, is that it's not like we're not at a stage where it's where it is affordable. In like if a product came out today, it's not going to solve like a hunger issue or be accessible to people who don't have huge food budgets available to them. And I think that when we hear conversation about, oh, there's plant-based meats happening, people are thinking like, oh, they're trying to do this movement to get these plant-based meats out there, but they're still so expensive. And so nobody can afford them. And, there's a chapter of your book, chapter 10, I think it is, about the like food security. And I think that if you haven't, and that's why it's probably one of the reasons why it's chapter 10, not chapter 1, is that you have to understand that this is in progress and things aren't at that stage yet. But yeah, because it feels like, how do we get it to that point where someone who really is on a budget can pay for that and feed their family with it?
Yeah, I mean, it follows the trajectory of, I think, really all innovation. And yeah, chapter 10 is about food security. Chapter 8 is about the nature of innovation. It's literally 10 years ago that the International Energy Agency, which is they are the global experts on energy transition. And 10 years ago, they thought solar was never going to come down in price sufficiently that it would make any meaningful upward trajectory of adoption and impact. Probably not even compete with the additional energy needs of the world. And so in 2016, they made their 2040 prediction. And literally 8 years later, their 2040 prediction had been smashed because prices were coming down. And so if you were looking at buying an electric vehicle, literally, 10 years ago, they all were exorbitantly expensive, and there was no charging infrastructure, and they didn't go very far. And innovation brings down prices, and policy improved the charging infrastructure, and innovation improved battery range. And this is just the nature of literally every innovation. And that's going to be true for plant-based meat and cultivated meat as well. And then, there's innovation and there's scale, and both are going to be necessary. And in the book, I look at what's going to be required. And chapter 9 is about the economic opportunity, and chapter 10 is about food security. And I point out that 7 years ago, the only governments funding anything related to plant-based meat or cultivated meat were Israel and Singapore, both of which were funding some startups. But no government was doing open access scientific funding. No government was thinking about plant-based meat and cultivated meat in the context of their biotechnology endeavors. And now there are probably 35 governments that are funding plant-based and cultivated meat. And every government that funds biotechnology to any significant degree has a food vector in their biotech work that includes plant-based and cultivated meat. So on the one hand, we still have a ways to go. On the other hand, if you think about it in terms of 10 years ago versus now, like at the end of 2016, there had been 4 scientific papers written about cultivated meat in all of human history. In 2024, there were 40 times that number in 1 year. It's not enough. I mean, it's still a low number if you're comparing it to a lot of other similarly important endeavors, but it goes up significantly every single year. And government funding goes up significantly every single year. So, we're pointing in the right direction. And at GFI, so the Good Food Institute, we're about 240 something people. The plurality of our team members are scientists. We operate in 6 regions of the world. And the number one thing we're doing is scientific ecosystem building. And we're doing that by convincing governments to fund science and engineering projects. And we're meeting with success in every country that we operate in, because governments recognize that this is a huge, it's a $2 trillion opportunity right now, and that's going to go up year after year after year. And then governments also care about food, the fragility of the food system. Like the inefficiency of the food system means it's also incredibly fragile. Every stage of production is fragile. So if you can not have to grow massive amounts of food to feed the farm animals, and not have to operate, you're growing all that food and you're shipping it to a feed mill, and you're operating a feed mill, and you're shipping the feed to the farm, and you're operating the farm, and you're shipping the animals to the slaughterhouses, and you're operating the slaughterhouses. Like every stage of that production adds fragility and vulnerability. As we're learning with what's happening in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz and fertilizer prices spiking. If you have to use a fraction of the amount of fertilizer, which you do for plant-based meat or cultivated meat, relative to actual animal meat, like that's going to make for a sort of tighter and more resilient food system. And that's the kind of thing that governments care about. So that's what Chapter 10 is about.
Okay. So with this innovation, which is always so exciting, seeing something new coming about and scientists who uncover incredible things. When it comes to food, like, is this an opportunity where people see it like, I can become a billionaire off of this, and now people still can't feed themselves food that is maybe nutritionally available to them and healthy, and like, what's your thought? Does it feel like something that truly could be an acceptable addition to consuming plants, or do you think ultimately it could end up, and I realize this is kind of a tricky question to be asking you, but where it could end up where people just see dollar signs and they're like, I'm going to be the next millionaire, billionaire, because I've got the scientist who has truly innovated the meat that replaces animals?
I mean, nobody's going to be billionaire on the back of this unless they're selling a lot of it. And they're only going to sell a lot of it if it competes on price and taste. So, I mean, the thing that I say pretty much constantly is that our goal is that plant-based meat and cultivated meat are commodity products. And that's the reason that our global battle cry is that governments should be funding the foundational science and engineering and solving those challenges so that we can create an entire industry around this. Like, I don't think anybody is as grateful as I am that Impossible Foods exists, because it proves that you actually can make plant-based meat that people really, really love. But until there are a bunch of companies that are doing that, it's going to be really hard to create the sort of competition and battle for scientific preeminence that we need. And if there's only one company, that's going to make it really, really slow road to get where we need to go. So on the one hand, I think it's great when entrepreneurs say, I'm going to make billions of dollars doing this, because if they make billions of dollars doing this, they will have to have advanced the alternative proteins endeavor quite a lot. But at the end of the day, the thing that is best about the private sector is that I think it inspires governments to see what's possible, and then want to incentivize their plant-based and cultivated meat industries. And that's how I think you really accelerate the development of the products and bring down prices, and democratize access.
Okay. So, Bruce, you're on a vegan podcast, and we've talked about your vegan journey. And one of the things that is mentioned in this book, and that you've mentioned throughout our conversation, is cultivated meat, which comes from actual animals. As you have, I know you're within the vegan world, people know who you are. You're having conversations with people who are vegan for their health. They're vegan, from an ethical perspective. What are the conversations you're having with them about cultivated meat?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And I think, I do have, so the first version of the book was about 3 times longer than the final version of the book. And it's still a little long, but I blame Microsoft Word for giving me bad word counts. But yeah, I mean, I talk in the book about all of the vegans who say, I don't want to eat that. And I think I was a little too vigorous in the early days of going, I don't care what you eat. But it's not like, but I don't like if you're eating a whole foods, plant-based diet, or, honestly, if you're just eating a vegan junk food diet, like this is not for you. I mean, if you want to eat it, great. And a lot of vegans do. So, I mean, I talk about the first time Susie Welch and I had cultivated meat, which was in October of 2016. We were both so excited, but a lot of vegans are not. Christy Lagali, one of our first scientists, like she couldn't eat the Impossible Burger. We were invited to Jardiniere, which is one of the 2 restaurants. It was Momofuku, David Chang, and Jardiniere, Tracy Desjardins restaurant in San Francisco. Those are the 2 first restaurants to serve it in the fall of 2016, and we got in like maybe a month early. And I had to eat the rest of her burger. She was like, no, this tastes like meat. And great, like if you're not eating meat, you're not supporting any of the external costs of the meat industry. And if you don't want to eat cultivated meat, great. But the world's eating 500 plus million metric tons of cultivated meat and seafood every single year. And this can be a solution to that. And I think it's probably the only solution to that, unless somebody thinks we're going to come up with like some new global diet change strategy. But that feels pretty unlikely to me.
How can you explain? Because I don't know a whole lot about cultivated meat, and my guess is that some of my listeners don't either. How do we obtain the cells or whatever it is that we need to start that process?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which company you're looking at, but it can be as simple as you take a sesame seed sized biopsy from an animal and grow unlimited additional meat from that. And in fact, the company Good Meat did it with a part of a feather from a chicken. So they had a chicken named Ian, and Ian was also, so Ian the chicken. And I think you're going to love this. Ian is an acronym. What do you think? What do you think the acronym stands for?
I'm not even going to try to guess.
I am not a nugget. So Ian was not a nugget. And they've got this video of everybody sitting around eating cultivated chicken, and Ian is like, happily wandering around, which I think is pretty terrific. Some people have also gotten cells from just slaughtered animals, including just slaughtered fish, for some of the seafood companies. But yeah, I mean that's where the sort of original meat comes from before it is then grown in basically what look like. I mean, we call them cultivators, but it looks like a brewery. It looks like the vats look like they could be brewing beer, but they're making meat.
Yeah.
So Kimberly, I need to make sure that I don't forget to do this.
Yeah.
I have the signature joke for your podcast. Okay.
Okay.
What is it called when one chickpea murders another chickpea?
Oh, I don't know.
Homicide.
Ah,
Now,
thank you, Bruce.
I was very, very excited when you said you didn't know any hummus jokes.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, but now I know one. You know,
I'm
when
very
I
happy.
was when I was reading your book, and I can't remember exactly where, but you've mentioned the vats and stuff like that here in our conversation too. It made me think of kind of this culture that's happening right now with certain people, you know, managing the guidelines for food, and this movement of trad wives and traditional living, where we're going back to the earth and we're not eating seed oils because they're so processed, and we would never touch an Impossible Burger because it's so processed. But you know, the raw milk that's going to kill their children is exactly what they need. How do you get somebody who's like that to eat something made from a vat? Are you hearing anything from that group that's kind of against it, even though, you know, it's not actually like ethically something that they're against?
You know, no, not meaningfully. And I do. I mean, in the book, I talk about the people who are protein obsessed, and I point out that the 14 plant-based meats that did the best on this study that an organization called Nectar, nectar.org, that Nectar did, the 14 plant-based meat products, they all have more protein than the meat they're replacing. The Impossible hot dog has 3 times as much protein as a meat hot dog. But they all have more. Some of them have substantially more. And at the same time, they have less cholesterol, less saturated fat, not a lot of fiber, but more than meat, because meat has none, lower caloric density. So they're just, I mean, they're healthier products across the macronutrients that people care about. On the cultivated meat side, like, you're literally looking at something that is so much more pure and so much less processed. Like, growing meat in tanks as opposed to industrial farms, like, you don't need the chlorine rinses, you don't need the overwhelming amount of drugs that are fed to farm animals. If you're talking about fish, you're not going to get the dioxins, you're not going to get the mercury, you're not going to have the bacterial contamination. You don't need to do any of the processing that is done to try to get rid of the bacterial contamination. I talk about how during the Biden administration, the poultry industry petitioned USDA and said avian leukosis, so chicken cancer, is not actually that big of a deal. And we want to have inspectors remove from the line checking for chicken cancer. And if a chicken does have chicken leukosis, we want to just be able to cut out the tumor and sell the rest of the bird. And the Biden administration went, okay. And so now that's true. Chicken can be sold that comes from birds that have oozing cancerous tumors. And the kicker is, the thing that the poultry industry pointed out is that that's already true for pork and beef. So they just wanted equal treatment with the cancerous beef and the cancerous pork. We want to also have cancerous chicken.
Of course, why not?
And I think once you're having conversations about how incredibly natural the current meat supply is, I think people are going to get pretty comfortable with cultivated meat really quickly. Not people like, I have some uncles and cousins who only eat the meat that they either hunted or fished. And I think they will continue to hunt and fish. And honestly, they're not contributing meaningfully to any of the external costs of the meat industry. I mean, I guess cruelty to animals, but I'd much rather be a hunted animal than industrially farmed animal, like no question. So I think that continues. But for the people who are eating industrially farmed meat, really hard to imagine that once they have two choices and they taste the same and they cost the same, and one of them has very likely to have Campylobacter, E. coli, and Listeria, and the other one, no. One of them could have, ivermectin and ractopamine in it, and the other one, no. I think I don't know about like the USDA and FDA, they have like minimum safe amounts of things like ractopamine and ivermectin. Like, I want no ivermectin and ractopamine well, if I were eating meat, I would
Right.
no ivermectin or ractopamine in my meat. And I'm guessing most people would prefer that if they had a choice.
Yeah, that's a good point. The vegan in me is still like no cultivated meat, because I still see that piece as like, even if we're just like taking, a feather from a chicken, we've taken that feather from the chicken without that chicken's consent, and now we're going to use that chicken DNA or whatever it is to like make more and more. And I understand like kind of like this utilitarian idea of, if a few maybe have to suffer a little bit, that pluck of the feather or that scrape of a bit of muscle or something, and then that means that 80 billion of their land animal friends don't need to suffer in factory farming the way they do. Like, is that worth it? Here's the trolley problem, right? And so I know that there's that justification. My heart still says like even these few shouldn't be used in that way, and that we should really be pushing plant-based foods. And I love a good Impossible Burger. It was weird for me at first too, kind of had that same reaction, like, and it had been 20 years since I'd had an actual cow-based burger, but it still like freaked me out a little bit. Now I've settled into it. I know what it is, and I'm okay. I've made I have a different relationship with it than when I first had it. But I really want us to like lean into the magic of plants and take the animals out of the equation completely. What do you think the likelihood of that? Like, do you think that really has the potential? Or as you've done this work, and I know, like you said, we're at kind of the beginning of this innovation, and but as it looks now, which one do you think has the bigger potential to become the thing that could replace the animals in the factory farms?
I mean, I think they both have tremendous potential to replace animals in factory farms, but I do think, it's interesting to me. Like in the early days of GFI, I was giving a lot of college lectures, and one of the things I would do after I would like lay out, here's plant-based meat, here's cultivated meat, here are the harms, here's the opportunity, and then I would ask people if plant-based meat cost the same and tasted identical, you literally couldn't tell a difference. Would you switch? And after having the whole thing laid out, like a lot of people would raise their hand. Usually most people would raise their hand. And the people who didn't, they were just like, they just couldn't wrap their minds around. And I talk in the book about, I did some like just sort of personal polling, where about a dozen people a couple different times, just like when I was on planes or in line at Starbucks, or a couple of times Starbucks, like the entire baristas at 5:30 in the morning in California. And I would poll people on, that precise question. And just inevitably, a lot of people would say no. And when you dive into why, they would say, well, it's not going to taste the same. It's going to be too expensive. And so they just like refused to suspend their disbelief. And that's true of innovation going all the way back. I mean, it's why, people couldn't wrap their minds around everything from airplanes to artificial intelligence. Like they just couldn't imagine that LLMs would ever be any good. They couldn't imagine that the ice that was made in that did not come out of a lake could ever be pure. And the same thing is true of plant-based meat. But once you really challenge people, there's still a lot of people who just like they absolutely believe they're going to waste away to nothing if they're eating plant. But cultivated meat, like, gosh, almost everybody. I mean, you get some people who like are legitimately hunter types, or you get some people who are legitimately sort of Alice Waters types, and they're only going to eat from polyface farms or whatever. But that like literally, I think literally 100% of people who will eat industrially farmed meat, which is almost everybody, is very excited about cultivated meat once you have a conversation with them about it. Literally the exact same thing, but without the bacterial contamination.
Right.
And that's not true at the end of the day about plant-based meat. And maybe once the products were actually identical from the vantage of the consumer and less expensive, that would like open people up to a conversation about the health benefits. But I think we get everybody on cultivated meat. Just like I think 100% of people, even the people who are early resistors, once your friends and family are eating cultivated meat and like the food poisoning like just goes away.
Right.
And honestly, I think the industry would just stop making industrially farmed meat. And it's interesting to me how often people will say, well, food is culture, food is so much more, because my take is we're not going to have to like launch big consumer campaigns. Like the industry will just shift in this direction. And just like imagine a focus group, Kimberly, in 1940, and you bring people in and you say, we want to put 50,000 chickens in a shed and we want to drug them up with antibiotics, otherwise they're all going to die. And we want to breed them so that they have 3 times as much fat as they have right now. And then we're going to cram 10,000 on the back of a truck and ship it to a slaughterhouse where like everybody would have gone, no!
Right.
And if we were having a conversation about industrial animal farming, everybody would have gone, that will never work. Food is culture. People, food is your, grandmother's chicken or whatever. They're not going to want it from this industrial system. And of course, people wanted the end product, and they don't care enough about production practices. And people are going to be a lot happier with a production practice that doesn't involve all of that and all of the products. Than they are about that. Like, it's the thing you said earlier, people don't want to know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, imagine a system where, it's basically your friendly neighborhood meat brewery with literally glass walls, which the, Upside Foods facility in Emeryville, California, they literally have glass walls on the facility where they're making chicken. I just don't, I think once we're at price and taste parity, like the industry is just like not going to go through the headaches of industrial animal farming anymore.
Yeah. Well, that would be wonderful. So like, do we need to explain? So you said you don't think we need like we would need a big push, campaigns and things like that. You mentioned, I think the next page after the line that I'd read earlier about like, what if they just had these burgers at McDonald's? So do you think it would become kind of like suddenly these companies they're just swapping out and like they're not necessarily telling people like, hey, McDonald's got this new burger, it's cultivated or plant-based meat, come try it out? Or do you think it just like kind of phases out the cow-based burgers and all of a sudden it's just that's what they serve?
Well, I think they're going to have to do that in the early days because it's going to be more expensive. So I mean, you're going to need the early adopters in the early days as the products are a lot more expensive. But every time they've gone on sale, they like sold out instantly. People are really enthusiastic. And I talk to people all the time who are enthusiastic. I mean, GFI, think most of our donors eat meat. And they would much prefer to be eating cultivated meat. And if they're giving GFI a significant amount of money, then they're the sort of people who can afford to pay more for cultivated meat. So the early adopters, and like, I don't know, like the point at which it's literally at McDonald's, it'll probably still be at a price premium. And I think there will be lots of people, the Impossible Burger, the Impossible Whopper continues to sell at Burger King. I think cultivated meat, I think there are going to be a lot of people who are very, very enthusiastic to pay a little bit more. I don't know what the ceiling on that is. Like, I'm guessing it's not more than 5% penetration while it's costing more, but that's still 5 times where we are now with plant-based meat. At 5%, it's globally, that's still whatever 5% of $2 trillion is. Like, that's a pretty significant industry, even at a price premium. And that allows you to get the scale that allows you to bring prices down. And the first principles are just so strong. It requires a fraction of the resources, requires multiple fewer stages of production, and all that goes into running those factories. So eventually it should be price and taste parity. And the goal of GFI and the focus of the book is how do we make that eventually as short as possible?
Yeah. Bruce, thank you so much. This has been really interesting. I have learned so much between the book and our conversation today. And I know that my listeners will get a lot out of this too. But I've got one more question before we run out of time. I told you I had lots of questions that I didn't have time for, and I was correct. But my final question for you, Bruce, is how does hummus show up in your life?
How does hummus show up in our life, in our lives, in my life? When I'm thinking about food, I'm thinking about my wife and me. We're certainly in the top couple percent for hummus consumption. So we always have vats of hummus. There's 2 of us, but we have the family style vats of hummus. And when I travel, Mediterranean food is really a staple. So it shows up both at home and when I travel. Probably eat hummus at least 2 or 3 times a week at home, and sometimes even more when traveling.
Nice. Yeah, it's just my husband and I here too. And we always have the huge, like, family size tub of hummus. Yeah. And you got to have it.
Can I plug the book website?
Of course.
Meatbook.org, MEAT book.org. And Publishers Weekly says it's one of the 10 best new releases in science. So
nice.
Very, very, yeah. And Nature Magazine named it one of their top 5 science picks. So I wrote a science book, Kimberly.
Yeah, you did.
It's also lots of stories, lots of anecdotes. Hopefully people move through it quickly. But if you read it, let me know what you think.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And the link for the book website and Good Food Institute, will have everything in the show notes, so people can just click and visit you, find you on socials, wherever you're hanging out. I'll make sure that people can get there. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Welcome back. There are a bunch of places that you can connect with Bruce. As he mentioned, visit the book website, meatbook.org. Check out the Good Food Institute website at gfi.org. Follow Bruce on Instagram at Bruce G. Friedrich. And the Good Food Institute on Instagram at the Good Food Institute. They are also on Threads under that same handle, and on Blue Sky under gfi.org. As always, the links will be in the show notes, so you can click right in and get right there. I hope that you have found this episode helpful and inspiring. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're loving it, please give Did You Bring the Hummus a 5-star rating and leave a review. It's an easy way to keep supporting the show. Be sure to share these episodes with your friends. If you're finding something good here, they will too. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Did You Bring the Hummus, and visit my website, didyouBringTheHummus.com, for more information about me, updates on what I'm working on, new podcast episodes, and all things vegan. Tune in next time for my interview with Anita Marriott, the vegan mindset coach. Thanks for listening.